This is a ManeHustle Media podcast. Hi, and welcome to Militantly Mixed, the podcast about race and identity from the mixed race perspective. I am your host, Sharmane, aka Mixed Girl Maine, and here we are back for episode 20. Before we get started, before I talk about my guests this week and everything like that, I do want to say thank you to our audience and our friends and everything like that for the show. There was a pretty big spike in downloads last week for John Corbin's episode, and that could be due to his cache of friends and family and such like that, or it could just be that y'all are sharing the show a little bit more, because I did do a little plea for that last week, and I saw a couple of tweets and retweets extra that I'd not seen before, so I think it did help a lot. We did get a little bit of a spike last week, so it was nice, and what I love about that too is that hopefully means that more people got to hear John Corbin's music. He was our guest in episode 1, and he came back again for episode 19 to share his new album Every Day. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that episode, please go back and listen to it, but also follow him on social media so you can get access to his album. It is on Spotify right now, but I think, it's actually purchasable, and I'm the kind of person that thinks we should vote with our money, and I am encouraging the audience to vote for mixed race music with their money if they can. So yeah, check John Corbin out. That's JONCORBIN music at John Corbin Music on Twitter, and he has links to his album through there. So yeah, keep listening, keep sharing, let your friends and family know that we're out here. It doesn't matter if they're mixed or not mixed, the show has something for everybody. If it's for mixed people, if you're mixed, you feel a representation, you feel a visibility. If you're a non-mixed person, you learn the nuance about mixed people and how to engage with us and things like that. So I think there's something for everybody on this show. Certainly the messages I've received from people reflect that. So yes, please keep sharing, help us grow. The bigger we get, the more successful ManeHustle Media becomes, the more access for people of color, queer people of color, comedians and artists and musicians of color, and all that kind of stuff, that we can start producing more content with those things in mind. So yeah, keep sharing, help us keep growing. And as I say every week, you know that this is a fan-sponsored show. So if you are so inclined, you can go over to patreon.com/militantlymixed and give us a monthly sponsorship that will, depending on what level, there'll be different swag items. I do have a couple things I need to add to that list, so I'm going to update those reward levels here pretty soon. And you can also, if you don't want to do a monthly subscription, but you do want to chip in a little bit, you can hit us up at paypal.me/militantlymixed and drop us a couple coins there. Every penny goes back into the show, whether it's helping our hosting or helping to soundproof the area so the quality gets a little bit better, improving our equipment, etc., etc. We're also I'm going to try to hit the road. I'm going to try to start doing some live tapings. I do have a tentative scheduled live taping next year. I'm going to try to get a couple more. And so sponsorship in that respect will help afford us the ability to travel to these other places and hopefully host some mixed race meetups and mixers and things like that. Mixed race mixer. So yeah. Help sponsor us, help us keep growing, share with your friends, tweet at us. Yeah, keep us going, because it's given me a lot. I hope it's given you a lot. The responses that I've been getting on social media or in email show me that there is a need here that isn't filled in other places. There are a few other mixed race podcasts out there, some that I even listen to, but there isn't like a steady, continuing mixed race experience podcast out there. I have looked high and low for this type of stuff. So the fact that it hadn't existed was the reason why I started it, and I'm hoping that we end up having 20, 30, 100,000 of these types of podcasts coming down the pipe. But in the meantime, it's this one. So help share us so we can get more access to mixed folks and get them on the show or get them listening and feeling represented. That's it for my pleas. Now let's talk about this week's episode. My guest this week is Palmira. She is a comedian of Puerto Rican heritage. She describes herself as a bi-black bitch, and she's actually someone that I know in real life. She and I connected through Marie Wachke from episode 6. She's a stand-up comedian just like Marie. I got to watch, the first time I ever saw Palmira was actually at the Moral Support comedy show at the Ruby that is curated by Marie Wachke. Her whole set was basically about all of her intersectional identity. So of course I loved it because that's straight up my game. So I reached out to her right away. Actually that night, or we were already tweeting at each other, but that night we met in person. It was like, you got to come on this show. So that was a few months back, but we finally made it work, and she came on board to chat with me a couple weeks back. So here we go. We talk about colorism in the Latin community. We talk about, she's from New York, but she grew up here in Southern California, so she dealt with a lot of racism from Mexican people or Chicano people. So there is that. So we do talk about that very push and pull type of relationship that Mexicans and Puerto Ricans have here in the States. Some of this stuff is taboo and some of this stuff is painful, but it's part of the experience. So I'm here to listen to whatever people talk about, and if their experience is this, it's important to share. So we get into it. We get dirty. We talk about how bad sometimes it can be, even in sort of the LatinX community's internal racism and things like that. One thing that I'm going to do today that I have not done before, since I grew up down here and I have grown up around a few Puerto Rican folks and Chicanos and Mexicans down here when I was growing up in Long Beach, I had a familiarity with some of the words that she was using that it occurred to me that some of my audience, whether you're not American or you are American, but you're in a part of the United States where you don't have access to these cultures, you may not be familiar with some of these terms. So I'm going to preemptively define them for you so that when she does say it, you can keep in line with the conversation. Some of it you can pick up from context cues and some of it you couldn't. So that's why I'm deciding to put it out here now. One of the words she used was Latinidad, which it's really a Spanish language word that it means, it's about the shared attributes of the various Latinx cultures. It's kind of a way of where you're not boiling them down all into one Latinx culture, but you're acknowledging the fact that there are multiple different cultures, different ethnicities, different countries in the Latinx world, but that there's an overlap, and it's that overlap that is the Latinidad. She also uses the term meate, which, if I'm pronouncing it kind of weird, that's just my lack of Spanish, but this was a word that I was familiar with because I grew up down here. It's a derogatory term that Mexicans or Mexican Americans use to describe dark-skinned people. So it is a derogatory term. She talks about how her family was called that term. Her father was called that by Mexican people here in Southern California and things like that. So that's why I put that out there so you know what that word means. She also said Boricua, which if you listen to music, you probably have heard the word, but whether or not you understand the word is a totally different thing. For me, the way I've always understood it, and anybody out there in the Latinx world that wants to correct me, please do, but I've always understood Boricua to mean Puerto Rico before the Spanish got there. So anything that is like real Puerto Rican, indigenous and or the non-Spanish influence or the non-colonial influenced Puerto Rican, that's kind of how I understand Boricua. And she also used those words Taíno, which is the indigenous people of the Caribbean. So there are Taínos in Puerto Rico. They're all over the Caribbean. But yeah, so like her background is a mix of the Taíno and the Black and the Spanish and all that kind of stuff in terms of her Puerto Ricanness. She also uses the word Desi, which this is a term used to describe the brown people of the Indian subcontinent. So Pakistani people, Indian people, Bangladesh, folks like that. She gets confused with being Desi or half Desi, so she does say that. So I just wanted to put those words out there so that you know what she's talking about. But yeah, we get into it. We get a little bit grimy. We talk about racism and sexism and all those types of things. We talk about her comedy. We talk about supporting women and women of color and LGBTQ women, trans women. We talk about safe spaces for LGBT folks and how when cis straight people come into those spaces and they're not realizing their impact on the safe space, the removal of the safeness of the space when they're present. So we get into some dirty topics and that's it. Like that's what this show's about, right? We talk about our intersexual identity, and Palmira is very intersectional just like I am, and we live our intersectionality like right there on Front Street. So it was a really interesting conversation. I can't wait to share it with with you guys. And like I said, we got more coming down the pipe with all these other recordings I have. So yes, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump over to our episode 20 with Palmira Muniz. And yeah, let's get it going. I would just like to welcome my guest, Palmira Muniz. Why don't you tell our guests a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into it.
Hey, what's up? My name is Palmira Muniz. I'm a comedian, writer, filmmaker, and creator living in Los Angeles. I'm originally from New York and grew up a little in Orange County. And I'm just, here being a Black bitch.
There you go. So I heard about you before I met you, or before I saw you, through our shared friend, Marie, who
is my marshmallow.
She's your marshmallow. She's so cute. So Marie and I were in sketch class together at the Ruby, and we became friends. And then she's the guest on my 6th episode of Militantly Mixed. And then I went to a show that she curated that you did stand up in. So it was the first time I got to see you.
Yeah.
And you're very funny, but also I guess we interacted a little bit through email beforehand, but it was nice to get to see you perform before I even got a chance to actually talk to you and stuff like that. 'Cause you, in your own set, you just laid the groundwork for everything that we're going to be talking about today.
Right, definitely. Definitely.
So I do have a lot of Afro-Latinas on the show. So we talk about a lot of different aspects of the complexities surrounding Latinx culture and, being Afro-Latinx, white Latinx, Spanish Latinx, everything like that. Why don't we talk a little bit about sort of how you understood yourself in the whole Latin thing growing up?
Well, when, obviously in New York, learning about me being Puerto Rican and being amongst other Puerto Ricans and Dominicans and pretty much every single person from Latin America and Latin diaspora, we got to learn about each other's culture really quickly. I knew a lot about different cultures at such a young age. And, all of that kind of stopped when I moved to Orange County, when, the main demographic of Latinos were definitely Mexican and other Central American, but predominantly Mexican. And, I was always brought up to understand that, while I was Puerto Rican, there was still Blackness in my family. So, of course, we had ties with Black American culture in New York. And, when I moved to California, although I was friends with a lot of the Latino kids, a lot of the other Mexican American kids, the other Black kids were the ones that were a lot more accepting of my Blackness and even of my Latinidad. They're like, oh, you speak Spanish? That's cool. Okay. But they just saw me mostly as a Puerto Rican kid, but mostly a Black kid. Whereas, and I had acceptance there and it was great, but not so much acceptance with my Latinidad in the Mexican community. There was not a lot of unity there for me. Even as a young child, I was denied a lot, especially because I didn't speak Spanish.
Oh, okay. And
that was really hard. When I did live back east, because I didn't speak Spanish, that was also an issue too, with other Puerto Rican kids and Dominican kids. Mm. So me not speaking Spanish was one of my boundaries that disconnected me with the Latinx community, no matter where I was. Mm.
Well, that's kind of strange. I mean, I grew up down here too in Long Beach, and the Mexican kids that I grew up around, it was a mixed bag if they could speak Spanish or not. They could all pronounce things with Spanish accents, or I guess specifically Mexican accents, but they, it would be a lot of Spanglish, mixed English and Spanish, things like that. But they they even down in Orange County, they were hard on you for
and I knew the Spanglish too, and you understand all your elders, you understand what they're saying to you in Spanish, and that's as good as my Spanish got. And I eventually took Spanish when I got older and ended up being the most I speak the most Spanish out of all my siblings. And it was just the inability to have full on conversations with folks and to be able to talk shit in Spanish. My talking shit in Spanish ability was very minimal. And so or even to connect with them on a cultural level. Like, you know, they talked about like anecdotes that only folks in the Mexican or Central American community can only experience. Well, I didn't have those experiences. And, you know, a bunch of our words are different. And, you know, there's this, unfortunately, in the Latin community, no matter where you are, there's like this unspoken like hierarchy, and it changes every time you speak to a different Latin person. And, you know what I mean? Like, no one ever thinks that their community or their nationality is at the bottom of the totem pole. Right. But they're at the top and everybody else is at the bottom. So, you know, you go to a Mexican community and that's what it is. You know, it's very a Mexican ethnocentric, and, you know, it's instead of like saying an all boys club, it's an all Mexican club. Right. And I was never invited ever. So, and it wasn't just me, my experience. It was, and mind you, my father's, you know, looks Latino, looks mainly mixed, and has Blackness in him, and you can tell, and speaks perfect Spanish and all of that, but, you know, was still called mayate behind his back by a lot of folks from the Mexican community. Mind you, my father knew exactly what they were saying. Right. I checked them a bunch of times, but even he was, you know, excluded from the culture, and he was, quote unquote, a more acceptable Latin person. You know, my dad's like salsa musician, and you know what I mean? So like, he was more of like the trope of a Latin person, but was still denied because of his Blackness. So it was, you know, even as a child, like my own experience, like it happened to my father, like with grown ass adults. Right.
What about the rest of all your extended family? Like, is it a mix of people who some look Black, some look Spanish, some look...
Definitely, like, keep in mind that my siblings and I, we all we're half siblings, because that's just that's how Puerto Ricans do. I don't know. But like, I'm 100% sure that even if we all shared the same parents, we would still look all different. I would still be the Black one. My brother, Eric, he's more on the mulatto side. You could definitely tell he's half Black. But now that he's older, he looks more like just very light skinned. My other brother looks Filipino. Everybody thinks he's Filipino. So like we had like, there's always like an Asian looking person in a Puerto Rican family. Right. And so we, you know, all of our experiences, like, yes, we all face like xenophobia in the sense. So we connect in that way, but like the racism that we all experience are significantly different. My brother never really left the East Coast, you know, like a Bronxite forever. And he... You
mean like in mentality?
Yes, but like he also just never really left the Bronx.
Oh, he's still there. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. And so his experience with racism is in a different extreme than mine. You know, obviously mine is tied with sexism, you know, being a woman. And, you know, but at the same time, he's had white people out here being the most violent towards him when it comes to racism, instead of other people of color being racist towards him. So his experience overall is just different. And he hasn't dealt with, you know, I don't want to say abuse, but that's the best word I can find right now, from Mexican or Central American communities who question his Latinidad. That's not something he can necessarily speak on. Whereas my other brother and myself, who graduated high school in California, that's definitely like a permanent, you know, memory in our experiences growing up. So, you know, like the way we look, along with like we're kind of all spread out like regionally, you know, we just like in combination, like definitely like create like something that we all have, even though we're all siblings.
Right. You know? Yeah. Here especially growing up in Southern California, what I always understood to be kind of an unusual aspect of Mexican heritage down in Southern California specifically was that you had the mix between, you know, Mexican immigrants, kids that were born here and they're first generation Americans and their parents were from Mexico. And then you got the old Mexicans who have been here since before this California was part of United States versus part of Mexico. So they were, you know, they're like hardcore in there, Chicano, you know, that kind of stuff. And you could tell that even amongst them, they were very divided. Like, you know, I'm not an immigrant, you're an immigrant, like that kind of stuff would kind of go down. And so if even within their own community, they're extremely divided, then you can only imagine, like, once you start going to the other parts of the Latin world, like what what that would be, but also specific. Right. And I don't know if this is specific to Southern California. I thought it was, but I could be wrong. Down here, though, there was a big divide between Puerto Rican and Mexicans, and you always saw that in school fights and in boxing. Like you squat up for real if you were on your Puerto Rican side or if you're on the Mexican side. There is no
I just didn't even know there was enough Puerto Ricans for that to happen. Are there enough Puerto Ricans to even beef with you?
I know there wasn't as big a community in comparison.
I literally thought it was just my family.
No, I grew up with Puerto Ricans too, and that was the first time I realized what people thought I looked like. Because back in the early '90s, I had crunchy curly hair and I stacked my bangs just like the vatos out here and stuff.
Oh my gosh.
But because I'm mixed, but my hair isn't like black hair. My hair is closer to Asian hair. And that was just the style at the time, 1990, 1992 or whatever. And so I look like that. And so I would be confused for being Mexican a lot, and people would speak Spanish to me, and I don't speak Spanish. And, but I didn't quite look like I look like passing Mexican. Like I could just kind of get past. And then once you realize I wasn't Mexican, it's like, oh, well, then you must be Puerto Rican, because down here we had Puerto Ricans. We didn't have a whole lot of Dominicans. So my part of the school that I went to in Long Beach, we had black kids, we had black and Puerto Rican kids, we had a couple of Puerto Rican kids, and then we had Mexicans, and then 4 white kids and a whole bunch of Hmong and Vietnamese. So that was kind of the spread out for my school. So because I didn't quite pass for Mexican, I must be one of those Puerto Ricans. That kind of thing. And
I feel like it's when you're racially ambiguous looking, it for some reason it gives people a lot of anxiety, and they need to categorize you.
Right.
I need to put you somewhere. I need to put my finger on it. You need to fit a phenotype that I've seen of these type of people. And, sometimes it's cute and we can play that game, but, it's hard to exist when people are constantly trying to put you in a box.
Right. Or that they won't even listen to you when you tell them what box you're giving them permission to put you in.
I would constantly get oh, so you're Mexican and black, right? And I had to fight with people because obviously there's nothing wrong with being Mexican. If I was Mexican, it would be lit.
Right.
But
you'd be waving that flag just as much as you would wave
the Puerto Rican flag. You know what I mean? And so I be playing soccer too. It's just so it's just I had to fight constantly to explain to people that, Puerto Rican had its own ethnicity, its own culture, its own history. And, while at the same time trying to even prove that I was worthy enough to be Latino, because again, I didn't speak Spanish and I look predominantly black.
It's so funny how people are about that too, because and this is, generalizing whiteness. This isn't saying all white people, but in generalizing whiteness, and that they don't see that you could have 11 billion different ethnic groups within Latin America, or Asia too, I would tell someone I'm Japanese and then turn around and be like, you're Chinese, right? And it's no, I'm Japanese. Right. Same difference, that kind of stuff. You'll hear people out here say some kind of Mexican. I don't know what kind of Mexican they were, but they're, that kind of stuff where it's just they're either Mexican or they're not. There's something else.
Right. And in New York, it's some kind of Puerto Rican, some kind of Korean. Or it's whoever is closest to you in your region. It's that kind of community.
Yeah, it's I don't comprehend your version of Mexican, but my Mexican.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So with that being kind of, it's a complete part of the mixed identity, but specific to Latinx, I think, or at least what I feel like I'm uncovering in all these different discussions I'm having with mixed people, is that you can go your whole damn life not even identifying as mixed race because you identify with the nation,
right?
Puerto Rican
both of my parents are Puerto Rican, so even that is kind of an anomaly in Southern California. I whenever people would ask me oh, so what's your background? I would say I'm Puerto Rican or Afro Puerto Rican, and then they would ask me what else, and I would say that is it. And so,
right.
It was that just having 2 Puerto Rican parents, because the Puerto Rican community was so small where I was so out there, but I'm not I'm technically not mixed, but I am. We are mixed. You know what I mean? My father's Afro Puerto Rican. Mm-hmm. My mother has Afro Puerto Rican in her family, but she in particular is not. So it's
Does she present more Spanish looking or more white looking?
She's Taino looking.
Okay.
So yeah, so like there's Spaniard looking folks in my family for sure. But we're the majority of, like, if the majority is not Afro, it's definitely Taino. Like,
so native to
Puerto Rico.
To the Puerto Rico
those are native
itself.
people. Yeah.
And even within that breakdown, like, is there kind of a hierarchy? Okay, let's get into the hierarchy stuff. In terms of your family, your direct people, what is their version of the hierarchy in terms of what's a real Puerto Rican? And
it's so funny. Colorism is 100% real.
It is fucking real.
It's so like real. I am benefiting and being a victim of colorism at the same time when you're Afro-Latino. For me specifically, because I'm light skinned, but in certain spaces I'm dark skinned. So in my family in particular, the blacker you were, the more Boricua you were, and the browner you were, the more Boricua you were. Like that was super celebrated in my family. I mean, for my father specifically. And, whenever we had like Spaniard looking folks in our family, like, we're all very loved and respected in our family, but it wasn't as like, you just weren't it. No one was looking at you. No one was like, you weren't cute. Like, no one was giving you special attention. And to hear about Puerto Rico specifically, like Puerto Rican cultures, like colorism and Puerto Rican culture specifically, obviously to me, it's like, damn, it does exist because it has to exist. There's no way in hell it can exist. But for me to never really experience that around Puerto Ricans I knew, and my father only hung out with real like Afro and Taino looking Puerto Ricans, like it was definitely like an eye opener. You know what I mean? Like, I know in the Dominican Republic, colorism is like significantly worse.
It is really
but I can't ignore that it doesn't exist. Like, I can't pretend that it doesn't exist in Puerto Rico just because my small family didn't, project that onto us.
I mean, and again, that goes to the unique and nuanced experience that we all have as mixed race people, is that most of the people I speak to that maybe have a black and whatever the other side of their mixed heritage is that usually the black part they weren't exposed to, and so they're fighting to try to like earn their blackness, whereas I look the way that I do, but I grew up 100% immersed in blackness. I lived in and like black hoodness. So when someone tries to come at me like, you don't know how tough it could be, and I'd be like, nigga, I lived on the border of North Long Beach and Compton. I know I look like this, but that didn't mean I didn't have it a certain way or hard or whatever. Just because my accent has changed because I've moved out of the ghetto a long time ago or whatever.
But not really.
But not like you can take you out of the ghetto, but like you can't take the ghetto out the girl. Like, it is still very much there. My reactions to things are very similar still. Just the other day, I have a bank across the street. Someone hit the bank. There were 12 cops out there outside of the bank. My reaction was, what the fuck are those cops doing in my neighborhood? Not that, like, I didn't, the breaking in and robbing of the bank was secondary to how terrifying it was to see 12 cops sitting outside of that bank. So this is very much like my experience from the people I talk to is unique because I'm coming from a lighter skin presentation, but a very black, rich culture. You seem to have that same thing too, which is cool for me because of our interaction. We'll be like, oh, we will have that thing together. But it just goes to show like how nuanced we are, and that our listeners are going to sit there and be like, oh wow, we're not all this one, we're not a monolith either, what about the divide between the Tainos and like the Afro-Latin and the white Latin presenting Puerto Ricans? When they are more pure, are they?
I mean, again, nothing that I ever saw, we're literally every shade in my family and both sides of my family. And it wasn't talked about really. But I'm 100% sure it exists. It has to. There's no way it can't. There's no way that Puerto Rico is the safe haven of interracial relationships. You know what I mean?
Do you have the kind of smell your own kind experience of Puerto Ricanness? Like, other Puerto Ricans can spot you a mile away, or do you?
Oh, absolutely. They can hear me from a mile away. Like, anytime, I talk, like, I open my mouth and another Puerto Rican's around, they're like, are you Puerto Rican? You know what I mean? Like, we're like roaches, we're everywhere, you know what I mean? But I do know that when the old school generations, it's definitely a problem because my grandmother, she was African and Taino, born on the island. And she, mind you, she was very like a college educated woman. And she met my great grandfather, who's a Spaniard born on the island as well. And, you know, they had to do the whole running away together to New York type of thing, because both of their communities were like, what are you doing with this person?
Right.
And so the creation of my father's side of the family was of that experience. On my mother's side, my grandmother was also a Black Puerto Rican, and my grandfather was a Spaniard as well. So they left the island. I'm not 100% sure of the reason, other than, you know, to gain a better life. But the old school parts of our family are definitely like, we marry our own kind around here. So,
which seems like that would be so complicated to do in the Latinx world.
Yeah, it's like, we are the same kind, though.
Right.
And that's where, you know, the tie to like nationality, to the nationalist like sentiments,
sure,
are just really messy, because, you know, in Latin America, we're literally white, Asian. You know, there's Latino. I'm sure there's Latinidad in the Middle East. Like, let's stop playing. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
We're like every shade across the board. We look like every single person, you know, and it's hard to just look Cuban or look Puerto Rican. Like, we look like everything. Anyone can look like, you know, any part of Latin America.
Yeah. Like with Asians, there are some things that distinguish us. Like, I can usually tell a Chinese from a Korean, from a Japanese. Sometimes Japanese and Koreans are difficult because we do share a closer facial structure and look and stuff like that. Once you start getting in deeper into Southeast Asian, it gets a little bit harder. I can probably identify Vietnamese or those that are sort of Chinese heritage, like Taiwanese or something like that. But once you start getting deep Southeast Asian, I no longer can detect what kind of Asian a person is. And knowing that, like, there's a margin of error for anybody that I look at, like, you know, I think they look really Japanese, but they're kind of darker skin, so maybe they're Korean, you know, things like that. With the Latinx folks, it's like, if you look like a famous version of a famous person from your heritage, then you feel like you can identify someone, but you might be totally wrong. Like, oh, that guy kind of looks like Cotto, so maybe he's Puerto Rican, you know, or something like that. But like, I don't feel like there are things that we just sort of know as being like, this is a very Puerto Rican look, or this is a very...
Yeah.
I mean, I guess definitely. Dominicans, I can usually pick out Dominicans. I don't know why. I guess maybe because I tended to be confused with Dominicans if I'm on the East Coast more than even Puerto Rican. But here I get confused more, I guess, Puerto Rican. And I grew up around Puerto Rican kids. Like, I still, every time I see the Puerto Rican flag, I shout, Puerto Rico, even though I'm not Puerto Rican. Like,
oh my gosh, that's okay. That's no problem.
It's just
you know, in college... For a good 2 years in college, everybody thought I was half Desi and half Black, or half Desi and half white. And so I kind of don't really guess anymore. You know, there are some folks where I'm like, nah, you Puerto Rican or whatever. But, you know, race and the like execution of like the way racial genes like look, sometimes it could just be up in the air. You know what I mean? You could have someone who you could have sworn was Asian, but was Salvadorian the whole time. You know what I mean? Like, so I just stopped guessing altogether.
Yeah, plus it gets dodgy. Like, you can make some mistakes that really upset people.
Right,
you know,
definitely.
You don't know what their sensitivities are and stuff. Definitely. So how do you become a comedian? And so one thing that I did love about the one set of yours that I've seen is is that you do lace your ethnicity and sexuality and gender and stuff, like, it's all the way through your set, and everything ties to your intersectionality. How do you go from just like being a mixed kid trying to navigate the world and be accepted to, you know what, I'm going to start talking about this on stage?
You know, because the thing is like, you know, we've all gone through like basically racial trauma. You know, the bullying that my family as a whole has, that, you know, we experienced. You know, my stepmother was also Mexican, and she was a white Mexican, extremely racist, and, you know, denied our Blackness all the time. And like, just that trauma to your identity constantly happening, you got to talk shit about it. You gotta like do something to like make yourself laugh about it.
Yeah.
You know, my family were all like, not my family is not on stage comedians, but I learned how to be funny from them. So, you just have to, you got to laugh at shit. Like, one of my jokes is like, because I grew up in California, like I'm a Jennifer Lopez and Selena, like, cause I live in California, I too have to play a Mexican, right? Like you just gotta clown how, what cards you've been dealt with.
Yeah, I agree. Like I still, I think, and probably this is something that we probably both share is the idea of how some of our stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason. Like there's grounding for some of our stereotypes, but we don't want anybody outside of our groups, clowning on us for those things. Those are for us to talk about. Yeah,
well, because you're not part of the club.
Yeah. So like I'm Black and Japanese. I'm either 15 minutes early or half an hour late, but you can't tell me, you can't point that out. I can say that, that kind of a thing.
Right,
like if I say that at work,
say Puerto Ricans are all half siblings because we're sluts. We know. Shut up. You know what I mean? Like you can't tell about like how we steal cars. We know. Like yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think talking about like I can't talk about my Latinidad and my Blackness without talking about my gender, without talking about my fatness, without talking about my queerness, because they never separate. They never separate. Though they are together as one for myself. And like I because I was dark, because I was fat, because I was a weird kid, I pulled a lot of attention to myself, or rather, I'm hard to miss. And so, that would create more of a situation for me to get bullied for whatever of those identities.
Right.
Not saying that I deserved it and it was my fault. I'm a vision, and that's not, that's what
you also on stage exude like a lot of confidence where you're like, you can say whatever the fuck you want. It's not gonna penetrate. That was basically one of the things that you just came out on stage and you're like, here's all the boxes that you are trying to check with your mind right now, and here's what I'm going to let you accept from me.
Right. Because people are going to think whatever about you. And, it's important to assert yourself and like to let people know like whatever you may think is probably wrong. But, I think definitely not just an onstage thing. That is definitely my presence 24/7 because I had to learn how to be that way. I had to learn how to defend all of my identities because they were constantly under attack by, if it wasn't people on the outside, it was people in my family, like my stepmom, or just stupid people like attacking, my gender, my sexuality, or my fatness in my family.
Right. So,
because like, just because ain't nobody made fun of me because I was Black in my fucking family doesn't mean they wasn't making fun of me for other shit.
Right.
And so, you gotta just like protect you. You gotta protect your experiences and what you've gone through because, that's all you have at the end of the day.
Yeah. Do you feel that there are times in which they are separate or hierarchical, or do you constantly feel like you were just like an even across the board? You are always...
No. There are times, obviously when someone's saying homophobic or biphobic shit, my sexuality is being under attack, right? And when someone's exhibiting, you hear me? Exhibiting like fat phobic attitudes, I gotta, protect my fatness, right?
Yeah.
And so there are times where they do separate depending on the situation, but there will, I meant in the sense that like, oh, I'm a Puerto Rican woman first. Or I'm a Puerto Rican first.
Yeah.
I can't even say it, right? Because I said I'm a Puerto Rican woman first, right?
Right,
like, yeah. There's never a first all together, So because they're all, like, I don't know, I look pretty bi. I hate when people are like, yeah, that guy looks gay. Like, that's stupid, but I look like that, definitely, with the fucking rolled up everything. But, my identities are on my face. Like, they are extremely present. So, I got to protect all of them at the same time.
So I'm a little different in that I do feel my races are more present before my gender and before my sexuality. And although there are times in which it is a part of it too, where like you are, I feel like my sexuality is a part that tends to be removed more only from other people's view of me because I happen to have married a man. But but
right.
I'm, I'm bisexual and polyamorous, and so for me, my bisexuality is hyphenated. It's bisexual, polyamorous, whereas others may not quite have that type of thing. But
I'm not polyamorous. Right.
Yeah, right. So like in my case, I'm heteromantic and homosexual in that I'm more sexually driven towards women, but I am more romantically driven towards men. So there's times when like I can
see, and you're even downplaying your own sexuality to another bisexual person. You don't gotta do that.
But see, we do this, right? Because we're programmed with that visibility thing. It's like, well, bisexuals aren't really gay. Like, they're really not part of the gay community.
I definitely always, and mind you, my first sexual experiences were with women first. And, my first crush was a girl first. And not that it matters, but, I'm definitely gay. But, I've had more relationships with men. And sometimes, like, I have to, like, coach myself. Like, Palmira, you're still queer. You still like what you like, and it's still okay. Your relationships don't define your sexuality 100%. And, it's definitely something, like, I feel like bisexual folks and pansexual folks like definitely beat themselves up a lot when it comes to like their identity. You're just not even aware of when you're doing it. Like when you called me on it just now, I was like, oh, I did just do that. Like, in the moment, I didn't even think that I was doing it. But we deal with visibility as a big issue. I feel there are times that I even downplay my bisexual identity against bisexual men, because I feel like if I'm screaming for visibility, these motherfuckers really need visibility, because they're always decided that you're just gay, you're just too much of a chicken shit to come out and be like all the way gay. And that's not fucking fair at all. It's not. And it's not fair that even as a bisexual woman, that there was a period of time when I also thought that. Same. Even in my own identity as a person that was attracted to both. As same. And you're just like disappointed in like your past self, because you're just like, all this shit that happens to you were doing to somebody else. Like you're fucked up. But so like in my case, when this is something I think is unique to white queer people, is that they can be queer. They can just be queer. Queerness for white people, it's the white man's minority. And so like white people, like you said, definitely get to be queer because that's their only other. That's the only way they're othered, and it's fun for them and it's great. Yeah. Whereas but being Black and being bi, mind you, we're just light skinned. Yeah. So like, imagine being a dark skinned Black woman. Right. And or a dark skinned trans woman. Who's also bi. So everyone's confused. Like, check all the boxes, bitch. Yeah. Like it's like I have this, you have no systemic struggles. Yeah. And the only thing that you really need in life is marriage equality, because you have everything else. We don't have, giving the queer community marriage equality is like not even the tip of the iceberg. Right. But for white queer folk, it's everything. Yeah. First of all, not all of us want to get married. And second of all, we're starving, bitch. Like, when are queer people going to get food? When are queer people not going to be fired from their jobs for being queer? Right. And that's something that white folks who, I hate saying this because I know it's not 100% true for everybody, but it is true for some white folks that you can pull back and you can be in the closet. You can hide, you can decide to be in the closet and to protect your privilege, even though your queerness doesn't ding your privilege, your white privilege at all. That is something of my personal struggle in my bisexual identity, in that because I married a man who really I happened to fall in love with my best friend from high school. I can't do anything about that. Is your husband white? He's white adjacent. He's half white, half Palestinian, but he grew up white. Like, he didn't know the Palestinian side, but he grew up around Black kids. So he's one of those people that he doesn't sound like, he's not like a Wigga type. He's not like I'm trying to be Black or I'm trying to be down. He's just like, he just grew up with a white folks. Dude who grew up with Black folks, who's accepted by Black folks, and he gets everything that we're talking about, and he knows when to insert and when not to insert. So, and if he's mixed, I'm pretty sure he also looks like us. Like, he looks ambiguous. Like, I see a mixed person. I think most people, I certainly, right now he has a beard, and I would not let him fly with a beard, basically, because he would be too much of a randomly selected person in that moment. So, for me, he's definitely mixed representing. Most of the people I introduce him to will say, what else is your husband? They can see it right away. He doesn't see it because he didn't grow up with that identity. He didn't have any knowledge of it until we were in our 20s. But he gets it, and he
even more so now probably than ever in our relationship, he's far more aware of just how unimportant any issues he may have as a cis male, you know, and sort of white understanding. Like, none of his issues matter right now. Like, he's like, everything else is important. And it's a rare thing. And obviously, probably someone like me who has a podcast about race and is a producer on a podcast about radical queerness, like, we would not be together if he could not, you know, maneuver in that world or whatever.
Right, definitely.
But like,
I see, and that's what I feel like a lot of white queer folks, or even queer adjacent folk, you know, like the straight girls who go to the clubs and they have one gay friend, you know, they're willing to date.
straight girls, stop going to gay clubs and celebrating your bachelorette
unless
party.
You are invited.
Unless you're invited. Like
I just want to bring this up. There's this one time I went to this queer club in Sacramento, and
Faces?
I do not remember.
Or the Mercantile?
I will find out for you though.
Those were my gay clubs growing up. Those were the ones that I was find out coming up.
Because like I went with folks who are from that area, and they should know. And there was a bunch of like white dudes and like white straight folks, and you could just tell. You could smell it on people when they're straight. And like there were a bunch of older trans folks who I'm sure were going there, safe places, and you could just tell on their faces how alienated they felt in their own fucking space. So please stop doing that.
I think it is Faces that you're talking about. So because I lived in Sacramento during my time where I was finally able to understand what my sexual identity was, and it's so. Like, shout out to Faces for attempting to be inclusive, but their openness
is more dangerous.
It's more dangerous because they were so welcoming of straight people. Gosh, I hate even saying it this way, but you know what I'm saying? Like, because they were so welcoming of straight people, it did reduce the amount of times. I mean, there were so many, like, and I'm doing quotation fingers right now, straight white men that would go to drag queen hunt, basically, you know, like they wanted to have that experience or whatever, and you could see it happening.
I'm not saying, and I know, like, there are straight men, regardless of race, who are like, their girlfriend may be in proximity, like, their girlfriend may be, you know, someone's best friend. And, like, it's genuine. And I know they exist. I've seen it myself.
Right.
But, you know, in this day and age, we can't take those risks all the time. And it's important for queer folks and queer folks of color, but queer folks in general, to have their own untouched space.
Yeah, like, don't come to our spaces to gawk at us like we're animals or that we're this fun
and like take our
thing.
Free drinks and shit.
Yeah, like, right. Like exactly. Like like allyship is allyship, and spectatorship is totally different. And I think that's what we get usually.
I've never heard that before, and that spectatorship is definitely like a thing. You know, like calling yourself an ally, but not. In my opinion, I think calling like allyship is discomfort in many ways. Like there are going to be times where you should give money to somebody in another community that is underprivileged.
Right.
Or, you know, if a community doesn't, like me as in all my identities, just like in the oppression Olympics, so we gonna play that. You know, I would win silver, and for the folks who would win gold, it is my duty to help them. Right. You know, just like I know I got it fucked up too, but there's people who have it worse. Yeah. So like I got to dig in my pockets, even though there's other people who should dig in their pockets for me. Right. Exactly. But I got to dig in my pockets and provide money for, you know, to other people. So when you're in our queer spaces, why don't you buy us drinks? Right. Why don't you, you know, like pay somebody else's bill? Or why don't you like chat with the people you're alienating?
Yeah, you're like, doing it at Starbucks in the drive-through, so do it. You know, do it.
Yeah, like, you know, why don't you buy this trans woman a drink since you all up in her fucking space? Like, it's you know, again, it's not one just to, like you said, spectate. Yeah, like it's diversity and inclusion. They're two different things. Like diversity is like the, you know, we're all here. Yeah. And inclusion is like we kicking it. Like we're learning about each other. We're helping each other. That's the inclusion part. And just think about, like, in our cases, the people that are, you know, like you and I, that are super, like, uber intersectional. We're women, we're queer, we're multiracial, we're multicultural, we're multinational. And we have to sit here, and every space that we go that is a quote unquote safe space for that group, if it's the
the Puerto Rican Day celebration in New York, or if it's cherry blossom in San Francisco for me or whatever, when you do see the people that are the outsiders, that's when you become like, it's already tough enough for me to maneuver in a Japanese space because of my mixed identity, although I feel very Japanese when I'm around it. I know that they're not viewing me as Japanese, so I'm already sticking out like a sore thumb and something like that. But then if you're not from the group at all and you show up, then now you're encroaching upon me and reminding them that I'm another. So it's like, it's not one of those things where you want to say, don't come here at all, but at the same time, don't come here like at all.
Yeah,
let us have safety.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's a big thing. And it's tough to like, you're constantly juggling because as queer people, we have to come out. We shouldn't have to, but we legit have to. Like even if we don't come out, like voice the words, I am a bisexual woman or something like that. If we bring a partner to an event at work, now they'll know what our sexuality is because of our partner or whatever, or at least they'll have questions. Part, right. In my case, I've been out as bisexual and poly at 2 different jobs. And in those jobs, the reaction was really different. In the really conservative job, it became this really uncomfortable thing. And I could tell that the whole, remaining time there, he was always thinking that whenever he saw me.
That's weird.
And then my next job, they were too cool about it and invasive, like
they were like, can we watch?
Right. Exactly. And that's what it was. And congratulating the holiday party and shit like that.
That's weird. That's weird. That's super inappropriate.
Right,
because I work in HR.
I was HR. That was the worst part about it. I was the director or the senior manager of the HR department. So yeah, like it was just like so many things that crossed the line. And part of me wanted to say, oh, I should never have come out this way. And the other part of me is like, well, why the fuck was I the one who had to behave a certain way? They're the ones who made it creepy. But we don't just come out in our sexuality. As mixed race people or racially ambiguous people, we have to come out as mixed as well. Or we have to come out as our racial identities.
I speak Spanish to any person of Latin descent. It's, you're Latino? Like, it's like...
Right.
It's either, oh, how cool, like they'll it's funny, like older Mexican folks know I'm Puerto Rican. When they hear me speak Spanish, they were like, I knew you were Puerto Rican. and which is cool. Like it's nice. And then they never speak English to me ever again.
Oh, funny.
It's great. And that's what I wanted, as a child. And
then there's like that we keep talking about.
Yeah. And again, even though we struggle constantly because I cannot speak Spanish, it's still nice that, you're trying to find some commonality with me.
Right.
And, the Spanish language is a mess in itself, but that's all we got right now.
Right.
And, and then it's either that or, you have some negative experience with one half Puerto Rican you've met in your life, and then you want to project that onto me. So, and like I was telling you, in some spaces, I benefit from colorism, and in some spaces I don't. And in the Latin community, 99% of the time, colorism, I fall victim under colorism. Mm-hmm. Even if there's another Latino in the room who is darker than me, but they look more Latino, if that makes sense. Like, because I look more Black American. Like, people just think that I'm Black and white or Black and Latino. Like, that's just been the consensus.
Yeah, like your facial features similar to mine, you're going to see that we're Black no matter, even if we have been... I did
say you look like my mom's.
Right, yeah.
Like, you look, like, for real, I will send you a picture. You look identical to her.
I want to see it.
Yeah. And they used to call her China because she looked Filipino. Like, I'm telling you, like, Latinos are a mess too. We a mess too.
Oh, funny.
But the regardless of the skin tone, is just the anti-Blackness that is in the Latino community. Right. Like, I am deemed the negra, which I am, in comparison to this person, even though this person is darker than me, but they look Latino, So if you're around other Afro-Latinos or Latinas or Latinx across the board, you squat up, right? You like tribe up? Oh, absolutely. Right. Any Dominicans, squat up. It's so funny you say that. When I've noticed that non-Mexican Latinos of any kind, not so much white Latinos because they don't give a fuck about us, but they, regardless of being Afro-Latino or just brown or Indigeno, Latino, I'm sorry, we squat up. You Peruvian was good. You Colombian was good, because like we've again, I hate to use the word abuse, but that's just what it was. Like, we've all been abused by the ethnocentric that is Chicano Mexican culture. You know, we've all had our Spanish made fun of. We've all been called ugly. We've all been called not Latino enough, and you know, or the words we use are bullshit. And we've all been through that. And so we squad up in general, regardless of being Afro-Latinidad. And then within that, you know, small group, Afro-Latinos, I'm like, my nigga. You know what I mean? We could say it. Y'all, they can't say it, but we can say it. You know what I mean? But in New York, it's not exactly like that. You know, there's
clear divided lines even amongst the Latinx population.
Well, it would be like the nationality thing. Like, Puerto Ricans will squad up, Dominicans will squad up. But in general, we were all cool. You know, there was always beef, obviously, because there's that's race wars. That's just what the fuck it is. But there was never a split. There was never like, whenever I hear, come to this Latinx event, it really means come to this Chicano event. That's what it is.
Right down here, yeah.
So it's not a secret. They don't feel bad about it. Like, it'll literally be like green, red, and white as the color scheme and stuff like that. Yeah. Me then. All right.
Yeah.
I'll take my boxing somewhere else. But yes, definitely. So whenever I meet someone who's Salvadorian, I'm like, what's good? Like, because we are the minority. Like, we are small, and we have dealt 99% of the time have dealt with some kind of abuse from the Chicano community.
Have you spent any time in Texas?
God, no.
I only asked because it's heavily, it's Mexican, but it's also Tejano and things like that. You know, even between those two groups, they're quite different. But like I lived there for a while.
So in Texas, they don't say Chicano, they say Tejano. Like, I know that's not the same thing, but like
the Tejanos are like old Mexico, or old. Texas when Texas was Mexican.
Right.
They've been there that whole time. Right. And so they're
like fifth generation.
Right.
Folks,
like this is legit their land, and then, Americans just took it over or whatever. And so there's a divide between those two groups as well. But like when I lived there wasn't other Latinx groups, there wasn't that I had experience with. There weren't Dominicans, there weren't Puerto Ricans, there weren't Hondurans, there weren't El Salvadorians or anything like that. And so I wasn't sure, like I still to this day don't know what exactly how it would work if other people showed up. It's just like, you're black, you're I was going to say pink, white, just slipped out, or you're Mexican or Tejano, and that's kind of like the only thing. So I always wonder like if there are any Puerto Ricans out there, like what their experience would be like.
You know what? There's Puerto Ricans in the Midwest. So we're everywhere. We're everywhere. So I wouldn't be surprised. And I would be very interested to see what that experience would be like, especially that accent on a Puerto Rican person. Because every Puerto Rican person, like every Puerto Rican person I've met, unless they were from like Chicago or Jersey, like they have a New York tinge of an accent. I don't know how. I don't know how. But it's like a default accent.
Well, I think it has to originate in Puerto Rico, and it's just kind of like hell.
Because you know what, the whole that I will say I'm 100% sure there's a Puerto Rican born in Puerto Rico and Puerto Ricans born in New York beef. I'm sure there is. There has to be. Right. But I wouldn't say it was as deep because because of our citizenship, obviously it's easier for the connection between and the joke is there, and it's not just my joke, it's all of our jokes. Like the Bronx is where Puerto Ricans are born. Like that's, like Puerto Rico part two. Or what someone said, Northern Puerto Rico is the Bronx. So it's like we would always switch back and forth from the island to the Bronx constantly. And so kids who were born in the Bronx still spent time in Puerto Rico constantly. I've been to Puerto Rico a couple times. My siblings have been to Puerto Rico, and I know a lot of people on this end who have never been to Mexico. So that beef, and also English is taught in Puerto Rico as well. I feel a lot more than other countries because again, because we're a part of the U.S. Right. So that the whole like, you're not Puerto Rican enough because you were born here. Like, bitch, you were born here too, or you were born in this hospital. you were born in this hospital too. You just moved back. Like it was never it. I not to the severity that I've seen with other cultures in general. Period. Regardless of Latinx heritage. Like I haven't seen like that. In my family specifically.
Right. So we're coming close to the end of our time here, but I actually would like to bring you on again later on, and maybe if we can grab one of your sets too that we can put on the show, because not only are we here to talk about mixed race representation and all that kind of stuff, we're here about, representation across the board. I want to see our comedians out there. I want to see our filmmakers out there. I want to see our musicians out there, like whatever, and promote the hell out of that stuff. So we'll bring you back so that we can do that too. Do you have any events coming up that you want to promote? I have a bunch of sketch projects with some groups. I just recently became a part of Latina-ish. Okay.
It's media content, and we make sketches based on our Latinx experiences, and it's actually great because I'm working with 2 light-skinned Latinas, and I feel like it's going to be a learning experience for them and for all of us, and so I'm excited. They're sweet girls, and I just got involved with this fat sketch show. So they're all like on the ground. So the next time I come over, we'll be able to talk about them. But now they're like underway.
Cool.
And I've just been so busy with that comedy has been put on pause at the moment. But that's what I got.
You did just do a set last night though, right? At Moral Support?
Yes, because I needed to get up again. So yes, I did Moral Support yesterday. Moral Support is a monthly show that everybody needs to go to. It's run by Marie, who we talked about earlier, and it's great. It's specifically made for like women of color and queer folks of color. So it was great. Yeah,
if you're in the Los Angeles area and you want to check this out, the Moral Support Show gives the comedians a chance to be recorded so that they have a reel so that they can push it out and get booked in other places, because it is extremely more difficult for comedians of color, WOC, POC, LGBTOC, across the board. It's harder for them to book at the top 3 or the other event, other places in town. Because of that, because they don't have reels. So it's an opportunity for that. It's at the Ruby. It's curated by Marie Watchke from episode 6, like Palmira said. And so far, like it took that first night, because I went to the very first one, and it was like crowded. I mean, it's a tiny, black box theater, but it was a crowded night. I missed last night. I missed the other time because I was out of town too, but it's one of those shows that it's so perfectly named to Moral Support. Like you're here to support these women of color and these comedians and things. Has it always been women? I know it was all women the night.
Yesterday, yes, we had Varut. He's queer and he's Taiwanese, I believe.
Oh, okay.
And or Thai, is that the same thing?
No, they're different races.
Okay, so he's Thai. I apologize. And Murray just takes priority for women because like there's so little of us in the community, and Marie is very like pro empowering women first, women of color first, like specifically women of color first, second, and third.
Right.
So.
Yeah. No, she's great about that, and it fits so cleanly into everything that we're trying to do over here at ManeHustle Media. It's like yes, the POC part is important, but the WOC part is because, the most important.
And then the queer WOC, is it, because we constantly always say like our racism is sexualized and our sexism is racialized.
No, absolutely.
So we have so much stacked up against us that like we need to like be there for each other, and we need to empower each other, and sometimes that means hold each other accountable too, and we got to take care of each other. So that's definitely what we try to do at Moral Support. I'm not a producer at all for that show. I just support Marie.
Yeah, same me. Like I talked about it recently, and someone was like, "Oh, I'm glad you're doing all these projects." I was like, "Oh, I'm not even a comedian. Like I'm funny, but I'm not a comedian. Like I just have a friend."
I was like, does Sharmane do stand up? But I mean, a stand up supporter is also just as good.
I'm a comedy nerd. I'm a big stand up fan, so I do go to comedy usually about 2 times a week, once or twice a week at least. And so it's a big part of me. I definitely fantasize about doing it. I've just never done it myself. I think my transition into, if I ever decide to get on there, I would probably be very similar to you, in which there would be no way I couldn't talk about my race and my gender and my sexuality as sort of a whole thing. I am funny, and I think of myself as like table funny. Like I can dinner table, I can fuck up a whole table, but like I don't know. Gosh, I don't know if I'm like stand up funny. I'd have to try it out.
Right.
So
bitch, I'm not even stand up funny. I just be talking shit.
Yeah, that's all it is. I just like to talk a lot of shit. So
yeah.
Tell everybody how to find you on social media.
Oh, okay. So I am Viva La Palma, VIVALAPALMA. That's a lot of A's. On Instagram and Twitter. So, and my email, which I will give to Sharmane's House of Promo, is Palmira Muniz writing at gmail.com. Hit me up for any freelance stuff, any projects, any shows. I am avail. And yeah, you know, I'm always working, always saying yes to projects, even though I shouldn't. But
no, we're all about that hustle. We gotta grind until we get out there. So I'll put all that stuff in the show notes so that our fans can check you out and follow you. And I just think that this is the conversation, right? Like we got to talk about colorism in because it's also in the you know African disorder. We didn't even touch on like the accessibility of the N-word, which I feel is such a nuanced conversation. That's going to be a panel discussion for me. Yeah. Like no joke, because my husband is a college professor and they dealt with that in his class recently, and it was just like it was just one of those gut punch things. It comes up so often on the show.
For the record, the more you look like Spanish, the less you can say the N-word.
Right.
Just for the record. That is the solution, or that's the summary of that, what that panel would be like, but there's a panel that still needs to be made.
Yeah, no, I definitely, like, it's come up, I'm basically going to curate the hell out of this panel when it comes up, because I think we need to have it from the Black American perspective. I think we need to have it from the Latinx American perspective, and then anybody that's sort of on the cusp of it, where they're here, but they're from somewhere else. Like, I think it needs to really be a discussion that we can see just how fucking nuanced these two words are. Two words, people. They're not the same fucking word. But
right.
But yeah, it's definitely something that we need to get. We're building towards it, but yeah, if you're happy to do it, I'll bring you back for that.
Girl, I'm ready. I got notes. I got my notes cards right here.
Right,
I'm ready for it right now.
Right? Like, yeah. So, actually, the reason why I am wrapping up though at the moment is because I am going to a comedy show. We'll put I'm here for Pro Comedy. If there's other comedians out there that want to come on the show, hit us up on all of our social media. You know how to find us. If you're listening, it's in the show notes. And any last words, any parting thing you want to say to the...
Honestly, Sharmane, I just want to thank you for having me. Marie linked us, and I was so excited about her show. Her episode was amazing.
Yeah.
You're amazing. You're super, super brilliant, super... you just have such an ability to think critically and to understand, and I always appreciate that in people. And I love your love for comedy. I think that's really great, because you not being a comedian, it's definitely genuine and not self-serving.
Right.
So
I just love funny people, and that's the thing. Like,
you're being a producer without any intent about anything is nice, and you don't see that a lot, and it's nice to be a woman and want to support other women in showbiz in general.
Right. That's the thing. And thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate that mentality of, we're not in competition with each other. We have to build up with each other, like link arms, build up,
right.
Stack the pyramid type of thing. Right. It's so tough for me to be in these situations, like in workplaces or whatever, when the women are in competition with each other, or the people of color are in competition with each other.
Yeah. Or like cis women in our communities are fucked up to trans women in our communities. Like,
right.
Like we're all sisters.
We're all sisters, and we got to build each other up. So on my other show, Black Radical Queer, Javia Nicole always says Black women before everyone. My version of that is it really is Black women before anyone, to be honest. But it's women of color before everyone, and I'm talking about all women of color. It doesn't matter where you're from, what part, if you're mixed, if you're not mixed, if you're trans, if you're cis, whatever. Like, we really need to view ourselves as sisters, because we're all suffering the same shit, whether doesn't matter what color we are, we're all suffering the same shit when it comes to our sexuality or our gender. Sexuality, there's all kinds of shit. We can get into that too, but thank you so much for coming on.
Okay, take it easy.
All right, thanks so much. Militantly Mixed is a ManeHustle Media podcast, produced and hosted by me, Sharmane Johnson. Music is by David Bogan, The One. And if you like what you heard on Militantly Mixed, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes and wherever you find your podcasts. ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.